Yeah. So I just went and had a quick look at two relatively local shops, and one of them there was nothing. The other one, I was lucky. Well, I guess how it depends on how you look at the word lucky, but I thought I was lucky that I came across a few things I wanted, and they were all put out today. So you can see there they have the date on the price tag, 7th of March, and that's really what it comes down to a lot of times. Is just being there at the right place at the right time. Soon after they put new stock out and no one else has been in. Because I went around a few places yesterday and you can just tell they have been cleaned out because there's just absolutely nothing of even halfway interest left. And yeah, that's just the luck of the draw. Sometimes you get there when at the right times. I guess if you have an inside source, if you know one of the workers of these places and they say, "Oh, we got a bunch of new arrivals today. We're going to put them out at lunchtime," then you'd be in. But that's kind of part of the enjoyment, I think, of it is going around and 9 times out of 10 you strike out and there's nothing or barely anything there. But every now and then you'll come across just a bunch of really good stuff. Today isn't really good stuff, but it's a few things. And there's one thing in particular that I was actually talking about last week. But anyway, first thing here is the soundtrack of the 1996 movie Michael, starring a mulleted John Travolta. Now, the front cover choice they used there is strange. A dog nipping at his heels, and you can see the angel wings. I never saw this movie, but I know the premise was that Michael was a angel that had kind of fallen to earth and had become somewhat human, and all the hijinks that entailed. You can see this is a dollar, but what I did notice is there's a label underneath it. So let's see if I can peel it off and see. So same date, $2. They thought $2, and then they thought better of it, and they thought, no, we're going to go a dollar, which I think they made the right choice. I don't think the Michael soundtrack was going to fetch $2, and everything else was a dollar. So anyway, so there's that. Looks pretty good condition. Little, is that a bit of fluff there? Um, what's her name? McDowell. Can't remember what her name is. Something McDowell. She was in Four Weddings and a Funeral. So this soundtrack, this is the dog, is not the score. It's just songs from the soundtrack. So we got Don Henley, the Mavericks, Aretha Franklin, Randy Newman, Willie Nelson, Andy McDowell is her name. Andy McDowell, and she sings on the soundtrack, which we've talked about that before. That when actors decide to sing a number, it's always a bit of a risk. I don't have any idea what Andy McDowell sounds like, but maybe she's a great singer. Maybe a lot of actors do have voice training, don't they? The ability to sing. So, okay, so that's that. The Charlatans, Melting Pot. And apparently this is a best of. I wouldn't have known it if the sticker wasn't there. I would have thought it was a album. Charlatans is a band I've heard of a lot when I was growing up. Their name was bandied about as a good band, but I've never heard a thing from them. Now, I might have actually heard something and not known it was the Charlatans, but I've never knowingly heard a Charlatans song. And they were kind of in that group of bands that kind of just predated Britpop. They were part of Britpop, but they were part of the earlier Britpop, where I think of, for example, Suede. So, when I think of Britpop, you inevitably think of Oasis and Blur. And they were more 90s, mid 90s, early 90s, mid 90s, and then through into the late 90s. Whereas there was a group of bands like Suede and the Charlatans that were maybe a little bit earlier and maybe could also have been associated with maybe more of the Manchester scene of the late 80s, like with the Happy Mondays. And I might be completely wrong in that. So So yeah. So looking at the discography, they've got an album 1990, 92, 94, and then throughout, after that. But they did have, 1990 and 1992 was pre-Britpop movement. So I'll be interested to listen through this. There's no songs that I recognize. It looks like there's a Chemical Brothers remix on it. But yeah, I'll be interested to see what that sounds like. A little bit grubby there on the CD. I might have to give that a bit of a clean. Doesn't really have the look of a typical greatest hits or best of, does it? Maybe it's one of those best ofs that was that was not authorized by the band. A lot of times when they change labels and the old label still has the rights to a certain amount of releases, they can kind of milk the band through best of releases without the band wanting them to do that. Once Were Warriors. Now, this is a New Zealand movie in about 93, 94, and it's actually a really good movie. Quite a harrowing depiction of some of the social problems that exist in New Zealand to do with domestic violence. And it stars Temuera Morrison, who went on to star in the Star Wars prequels as Jango Fett, Boba Fett's father. I think it's in the second, there he is there, the second of the prequels. So Phantom Menace, the Attack of the Clones. I think he's in that first. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. He's been in a few other movies as well. Now this soundtrack has a mixture of New Zealand Maori music and also kind of, I guess, urban New Zealand music. So we got Rua Kenana, Merania. I remember the song from this was the video that was around was the one of South of Bombay. Was that on here? What's the Time, Mr. Wolf? Is that? No, I don't think it's on. Oh, there it is. What's the Time, Mr. Wolf? South side of Bombay, not south of Bombay. And the theme from Once Were Warriors, which is a kind of guitar. And it reminds me, I can't actually even have it in my memory at the moment, but for some reason I associate it with the Steve Vai song, For the Love of God. That kind of guitar, that I think it's similar to the Once Were Warriors theme. I don't know who played that. Oh, Tama Renata. So maybe Tama Renata took inspiration from the Steve Vai classic. But yeah, I've never seen this available before. So I was actually, that's for me, someone who collects soundtracks, especially 1990 soundtracks. This is a pretty big get. Made in Aotearoa. Aotearoa is the Maori word for New Zealand. And it's becoming more commonly used in daily life. You see it used in the media and stuff when referring to New Zealand. Our passports on the front cover now say New Zealand Aotearoa. It means the land of the long white cloud. But yeah, it's a good movie. I recommend the movie if you get a chance to see it. I think it's actually on YouTube. Or at least there's some scenes on YouTube. Now this is the one. If you go back through my video list, you'll see last week I did a Foo Fighters collection video. Because I own a good chunk of the Foo Fighters discography secondhand. With a hole for this one here. Echo, Silence, Patience and Grace, as well as the most recent two, Concrete and Gold and Medicine Midnight. But just by a few days later after doing that video and talking about how I don't have this and I'm looking out for it, it was in there. It was just sitting on the shelf. And it's been there since the 27th of February. So it's been sitting there for about a week. And, usually you'd think Foo Fighters is something that would fly off the shelves. But I did notice that the jewel case is completely gone, which usually means that the CD is not going to be in the greatest condition because it's been sliding around in there. It looks like it's got a few kind of like, I don't know what those things are. You can see kind of like dots. It's kind of like where dust or almost like kind of like a mold or a mildew is built up. You can usually wipe it off pretty easily, so I'm not too worried about that. But yeah, I might try and replace that because that's when it's completely missing like that. It's not a good thing. So yeah, so I've got that now. So now I've got everything except for the last two. And of course, the big song from this was The Pretender. Usually most Foo Fighters, especially later Foo Fighters albums, have their first single was like a hard rocking, quite catchy rock song. So you think about from One by One, it was All My Life. From the one after that, I'm not going through all of them. Anyway, from this one, it was The Pretender. Pretender was the initial single, hard rocker. The other single I think was Long Road. Actually, it says on here, doesn't it? Featuring The Pretender and Long Road to Ruin. To be honest, I'm not actually familiar with the rest of this album, so I have to give it a listen. But anyway, I got that. And finally, I got a Groove Armada album, Love Box. I think I have a best of Groove Armada compilation, as well as, what was the one before this? Goodbye Country, Hello Nightclub. So Groove Armada, I'm a little bit kind of, look at that. This is a promotional copy for promotional use only, not for resale. Well, someone has resold it secondhand. What are you going to do about it? Who's the record label? Doesn't even say the record label. Who's that? It's down here. Jive Electro. Do they even still exist? Groove Armada is a band that I wouldn't say I'm a huge fan of, and some of their stuff, some of that, I like electronic music, but there's some, when it gets too clubby, too made for dancing, I don't like it as much. And sometimes Groove Armada does go more towards that side of the spectrum of electronic music. So yeah, we'll be interested to see what this sounds like. Okay, their record Jive Electro does not exist. It's inactive. It was bought under the parent company of BMG as their distributor, and it's inactive since 2004. So they're not going to do anything about this resale, because that probably would have been high on their list of tasks. So yeah, that's pretty cool, I think. At least that one especially, because it was something specifically I was looking for, and it's not often that you come across that things that when it does happen, it's it's a good day, and I did come across something. But this one also, I'm quite happy to have those two. The other ones are more kind of just fillers that I'm interested to hear. I want to add to the soundtrack collection, and that one I just got because I guess I'm interested to hear that too. But these two are kind of important parts of my overall collection, so happy to have them. All right guys, thank you for watching.